Only 30% of family businesses make it to the second generation, and only 12% of those survive to the third generation. So if you're part of a family business and trying to carry the legacy on, the odds are stacked against you. Most people try to turn to lawyers, books, or consultants who've never actually lived through the family dynamics, the tension, or the emotional weight that comes with passing a business down, or who don't have to live with the consequences if it doesn't actually work right. But what if you could hear directly from someone who's already done it successfully times three? In this video, I sit down with Keith. He's a third generation business owner who walks us through his real journey, growing up in the business, managing it under his father, and then eventually buying it from his dad. He shares exactly what worked, what didn't work, and what he would do differently if he had to do it over again. And guess what? It turns out handing down or buying a family business does not have to be as messy or as emotional as everyone makes it out to be. It can actually be done very well, where you have a successful business and a great relationship with your family afterwards. Let's see how Keith did it. So tell us how you ended up being a business owner.
Well, as these things go, it was a family business. I'm third generation, and everybody's heard the cliche about the third generation owner of a family business and what usually happens with it. So you're under a lot of pressure right from the start to make it all work. But um, yes, I was very fortunate. I've been very fortunate in life in general, and everybody thinks everything is given to you in a lot of these regards, but that wasn't the case here. I was involved with the family business. Like I say, I was mostly lucky enough to get involved right out of college when I was 22 years old. Jumped right from college into running this business, and it was very exciting. And I've learned quite a bit very quickly, but we can talk about that later. The short version is that I started running the business in 1991. And then I actually purchased it outright from my family in 2009. So ran it for quite a while. I wish I would have done that sooner. I wish I would have purchased it much sooner. But purchased it in 2009 at the height or the low point of the giant crash in 2009. Seemed like a great time to buy a business. And so I've owned it ever since 2009, going on 15 years now, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, so third generation owner of a family business.
So, growing up as a kid, did you always know that eventually you would take over and run the family business? Or was it in your head like, do I want to do this? Maybe I want to go do something different.
No, there was no question in my mind what I wanted to do, and it's what I still want to do. And it's something that it's type of business that is very easy to get excited about and be really excited about the product that we build and a lot of the people that we work with. And so when I was a kid, that was my dream, was like life couldn't be any better than running this business, and I really looked forward to that day. And then, be careful what you wish for, as they say, because, that's the way things played out. And sure enough, I was running the business at some point, and it's like, whoa, this is a little bit more complicated than I thought it was going to be. And it's not all fun all the time. So, but no, been very fortunate again. And this was something that I always wanted to do. Can't believe that I've been able to enjoy a life of doing something I love so much.
So, your grandfather started it.
That's correct. My grandfather started the business in 1964 or a little bit earlier. And he was very active in it up until the early 1970s. Then my father became very active in it until the late 70s, early 80s. And then we had some outside managers outside the family running the business up until 1991 when I got involved and took it over full time.
So were you alive when did you watch as a kid the process of your dad taking it over from your grandfather and that transition, or was that way before your time?
Well, I was alive. Yes. I'm not sure that that was really on my radar when I was like 3 or 4. So, but yeah, I got to see my dad's involvement. Certainly, I wasn't really aware of what was involved in the transition with him running the business and things like that. But I did get to see how he ran the business and how involved he was, because the first thing you learn, or first thing I learned was like, you never stop. It's not a 9 to 5 job owning a business like this or owning any business. He would oftentimes come home from work and then continue to work at home in different ways. Or he'd come home from work, grab dinner, and then go right back to work, and then come home again at midnight and turn around and do the thing all over again the next day. Um, it just never stops when you're a small business owner.
What was it like when you got out of college and started working in the business while your dad still owned it? Was that an interesting dynamic, or was it smooth and everyone kind of knew their place, or was it did you have the conversations ahead of time that needed to be had to where it was smooth?
Well, it was smooth in some ways, and almost regrettably smooth, because um, I think because of my father's experience with his father. Um, my father was very hands off. And he also, at this point, he was running another part of the family business that was quite a bit larger and quite a bit more complex. And so that really consumed all of his time. And he really didn't have time to be involved in this side of the business. So it was quite literally a case of, you know, graduate from school, move home, and boom, go to work on Monday. And here, you're in charge. Let me know if you have a problem. And kind of sent me on my way, and without a lot of guidance. He was always there if I needed him. There was never a question about that. But sometimes, expectations weren't necessarily very clear and things like that. And so I was left to kind of find my way on my own. And when you're young and freshly out of school, you think you're pretty smart. You just spent 4 years of your life in college, and you think you've got all the answers. And then when you come back and get involved in this business that's been established for, roughly 20 years at that point, with some employees, or actually 25, 30 years at that point, and with some employees that have been there for 20 to 25, 30 years, all of a sudden you walk in the door and you've got all the answers to everything. It doesn't always go super smoothly. And I think that feeds into one of the other questions you may want to bring up. And, you know, are there things I wish I would have done differently? And certainly the most obvious, and it's something that everybody tells you in business school, is never go to work for the family business directly out of school. And that's what I did. Hindsight being what it is, I really wish I would have taken a year to go work maybe in an unrelated industry, obviously an unrelated business, but work for somebody else. So you get that real world experience outside of what you've already seen. Because when you're raised in that family business, you already know how it's sort of done there, and you don't see how things are done elsewhere. So um, you don't have sort of a fully formed worldview when it comes to operations and things like that. So that's the one thing I really wish I would have done differently, was take a year or more even, and sort of go see the world through another business's eyes.
What'd you go to school for?
Very interesting. I originally went to school to be a manufacturing engineer. And um, to be frank, the weed out classes that they put you through early on were very effective and pretty much weeded me out. And I convinced myself that if I'm a really good manager, I can always hire a good engineer. So I switched majors and became a business management major early on in school. And that was probably the right move for me.
Do you feel like you learned a lot through that business management degree that was applicable into the business?
That's a really good question. There's a real distinction between book knowledge and school taught knowledge, or however you want to refer to it, and gained or learned real world knowledge. Those are two radically different things as far as I'm concerned. Did the 4+ years I spent in school, did they fully prepare me for what I was about to face as running a small business? Which at the time we had 12 employees when I took over, and it was a union shop. So that was a real challenge. I mean, there's a lot of things that I still retain, I think, from my years in school, but there's just so much more that you learn that there's so much more that you can't learn in school. And that you have to just sort of be eyes wide open all the time and just be a giant sponge once you get out of school. To me, there's just no substitute for like life lessons. And I mean, I'm not the type of person that can read a book and go, okay, well, this is how you do it because I just read this book. I have to see it and experience it myself to really understand it. And so that's one of the great things about trying things and failing at things, you learn from it. So you just kind of figure it out on your own in a lot of cases. And to me, that's just the most effective thing you can.
So talk to me about coming in straight out of college and then being in charge of union employees who've been there for maybe not all of them have been there for longer than you'd been alive, but
They
had
have
been
in
there.
some cases. Yeah, they really had. And that
And
was,
then you come in telling them what to do. How was that transition? What did you learn? What do you wish you would have done different?
I wish I would have done it all differently. It's so hard because again, you don't know. You think you know because this is what they told you in school. And you think, again, you read the book and you went to the class and you listened to the lecture. And then you get there and you're dealing with real world situations, some of which can be very difficult. And now you're a 22-year-old kid trying to tell a 50-year-old employee that's been in that business for 25 years how you want something done. um, it's very difficult. And it was very difficult for me to do that effectively. Hindsight and age are two great things. It's really easy to look back and go, I should have done all that much differently. But at the time, you just don't know. You really don't know. And some people figure it out more quickly than others. But I would say never underestimate the importance of communication, communicating things clearly with all of your staff, with everybody, all of your coworkers. I mean, if you don't communicate, and I'm still guilty of this today, that's the hardest for me. That's the hardest thing you do is communicating effectively with staff and coworkers. It's just difficult to do, and it leads to sort of the root of all issues, really. And if you don't communicate goals and expectations clearly, people don't know what you expect. But dealing with a union shop when you're a 22-year-old kid right out of school, not something I would recommend for everybody, but that's what I did and managed to survive.
So now where you're at, do you hands-on manage all your employees, or do you have managers set up throughout where you just kind of handle the top tier people and they manage the people under them?
Well, on a smaller scale, I mean, I think you're envisioning like, lots of employees. Right now, we're definitely smaller than we used to be for a variety of reasons. Um, but yes, I have a person that sort of runs the daily operations for me, and I try to focus on, the big picture items, which is always tough.
So when you took over, but your dad still owned the business, what was it like negotiating what your pay would be? Like, did you just get a percentage of what you were able to bring in, or did you and your dad have to sit down with a desk between you and negotiate a salary?
Uh, it just sort of happened. And that's the way it kind of goes in my family. Communication has never been our strong point. So, no, there was never a lot of negotiations. I always felt like I was treated fairly, and there were times where I felt like, you know, hey, it would be nice if I could get some more money here. It was always fine. It always worked out, but there was never a clear cut path. There was never a straightforward path there. And that's something that you have to be a very disciplined person, very organized person with a clear set of goals, um, would have all of that dialed in to where, okay, on December 1st, we sit down and you, as my father slash owner, are going to evaluate my job and the job I've done over the last 12 months. And we're going to talk about all the things that were good and all the things that weren't so good and the areas that we need to improve upon, and tell me what next year looks like financially and what your expectations are. That's how that all should have played out. Um, But for whatever reasons, in spite of having a great relationship with my father and entire family, it was just always difficult for us to communicate about business. And that,
I think that's normal.
for me, it was normal. It's uncomfortable. It's just sort of an uncomfortable conversation to have. Anyway, having it with a family member makes it even more uncomfortable. Yeah, it's difficult. And that's one of the things that I wish I was better at.
So you knew your end goal was to always own the business. I guess you probably had three options, like one, I buy it now, two, I buy it later, or three, do I wait until the previous generation passes away and hopefully I inherit it? Like, did you kind of have three options that you had?
I wouldn't say it was really necessarily three options. I mean, I think the larger business, the parent business at the time, was at a point where they wanted to focus more on their operations, and I think a lot of people there felt like the business that I was running was a bit of a distraction for that larger business. So I think there was some pressure to either, you know, sell the sell my what ended up being my business, sell it outright to whoever, or sell it to a family member. I don't want to say it was forced or anything like that, but it actually started on their end. They were kind of like, hey, how can we make this work? And then we had some outside advisors come in and say, look, this is what this could look like. And it all worked out and made it work out in a really crazy financial time. And I'm not sure I really knew what I was getting into. I mean, if you remember 2009, I mean, the economy was crashing in a massive way in the industry that I'm involved with and my business is involved with. The industry was halved in that period, 2009, 2008 to late 2009, 2010. Our business was cut in half. I love the business and love being involved in it so much. I'm like, yeah, let's buy this. Now's the time. Let's go. I don't want to see this, get away from me. So convince my wife that this is a great thing to do and we should do it. And she's been really supportive. And she says, okay, if you think this is what we need to do, let's do it. And so we did. And we dove right in. Crazy time.
Did the advisors that you guys brought in, which is very smart to do, did they do a business valuation and that kind of determined what the purchase price was going to be?
I would say, yes, there was a business valuation, but not completely objective. I think there was like, well, look, this is what we can do to make it work. This is how we can make it all work. So I probably paid more than I wanted to pay for it, and they probably got less than they wanted to get for it. But in the end, it worked out. And it's just so hard to have a very disconnected arm's length transaction on something like that when it's family, and today you're buying the business from him or them, and tonight you're having dinner and celebrating somebody's birthday. I mean, it's very difficult to draw that distinction and separate family from business.
Did you get a loan to make the purchase, or did you figure out some sort of repayment from profit? They hold the note financing option.
No, it required outside financing.